We get to the top and we're overlooking Boulder. And I'm like, hey, Jerry, what's the name of this hike? He's like, I don't know. So we're walking down and I see this sign, and the hike we're on is called Mount Sanitas, Sanitas, and so I'm like, oh, wonder what that means. So I get back, we get a signal again. I look up the word Sanitas, and it's this Latin word that says like soundness of mind, soundness of body, correctness of style. And I'm like,
welcome to the Elev8 podcast. I'm your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. Thank you for tuning in. If you are a return listener, I'd be grateful for your rating or review. And if you dig this episode, give us a like or share. And now, whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guest this episode is a former college soccer player at Fordham University, where he was a captain and champion. He's the author of 2 books, Changing the Game and Every Moment Matters. They are linked up here. His Tedx talk is approaching 500,000 views on YouTube alone. He has coached soccer for over 20 years, and he is the founder and CEO of the Changing the Game project. Welcome to the Elev8 podcast, John O'Sullivan. How are you doing today, John?
doing great, man. Just got back from a little bit of exercise and I'm feeling energized and ready to go.
Good. Great to hear. I've been a follower of Changing the Game for a long time. I remember watching your TEDx talks many years ago. And listeners that might not be familiar with Changing the Game, can you talk a little bit about your organization and kind of what the mission is and what you got going on?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. LinkedIn just told me that January was my 10-year anniversary. So yeah, 10 years ago, I was pretty burnt out from coaching and the politics of youth sports and needed to sort of shift and do something different. And had this opportunity to, I just decided to write a book. And then, so I write this book, Changing the Game for parents and help them out. I figured like, hey, I've learned a lot over a couple decades of coaching and I'm now in it with my own kids, and then realized pretty quickly, like it's not that hard to write a book. It's kind of hard to sell a book. And so then my publisher was like, you have to start a blog. And it was really the Changing the Game project movement and blog that helped the work take off. Started speaking, got to do a TED talk, all that. And yeah, a couple of years ago, we started a podcast called Way of Champions and with Jerry Lynch and I. And then, I guess 2 years now, I published a coaching book as well called Every Moment Matters. And COVID's been crazy for all of us. Working a lot virtually, doing some in-person work. And, just looking forward to the time when we can get back out there connecting with people on a one-on-one level and not through a screen. No offense.
Yeah, no offense. It's been got to take advantage of what you can when you can, right? You mentioned kind of that transition out of coaching. What were maybe those key factors that where you felt the need for sharing some of the things you do?
My sort of origin story that I tell, I was watching my daughter, who was 6 at the time, playing, and it was your great 6-year-old soccer game, right? And the giant blob of kids, and they fall and they trip, and sometimes they score in the wrong goal, but they're still excited. And the parents get it and they're positive, and no one's like angry that their kid is picking daisies or whatever. They're just like happy they're out there and it's a nice day. And right next door, there's this 10-year-old game, and it's a competitive game, right? And all the parents are yelling at the kids, and they're all yelling at the, ref who's like 12, and, the coaches are, and it's just like, I'm like, oh, that's like disgusting. Is anyone on my field going, wow, 4 years, we can spend lots more money and do that, and so that was kind of it. And I was like, wow, like, I think, 99% of parents love their kids and they just want to help, but they don't know where to look. They don't know what good looks like. What does good coaching look like? What is a good youth sports environment? What does a good club do to provide you with resources? How can I help my kid? What should I say after a game if I'm frustrated or angry? How how do we approach these things? And I felt like there wasn't really this resource for it. And so I'm certainly not the only one, but I feel like Changing the Game project became a good place for people to go and go, oh, okay, yeah, this is good stuff here.
Yeah, no, you're a wonderful storyteller. Is one of the things I think I always appreciate in some of your blogs over the years, especially in getting good points across and being authentic. So when you take a look at youth sports, high school sports, that kind of ecosystem, what's the kind of greatest threat that you see facing it right now? And then if it's different, maybe 5 to 10 years from now?
Well, I mean, I think one, the meritocracy, right? Sport used to be this place where it didn't matter if you had money or whatever. If you were good enough, we had a spot for you.
Yep.
And now youth sport has been pushed to these high commitments and private coaching and all this stuff down so young that, you know, if you don't have the money and the time, your kid's out of the pipeline, right? Or, you know, they don't get in the pipeline at 7 because they want to play football and basketball and baseball. And the football coach or the baseball coach or the basketball coach is saying, you only do this if you want in this group. Right. And so they're forced to specialize when they shouldn't and when they don't want to. So they lose ownership, or they keep trying to do a couple of sports and then all of a sudden can't get back in, even though they're a great athlete. And some sports naturally let people back in the pipeline, right? If you're 6'10", your basketball coach is going to give you a shot, right? If you're a great athlete, you can probably jump back into baseball, whatever. Same thing with football, right? But then there's other sports that require a lot more and you can't get back in. And so, you know, to me, that's this threat. And the numbers bear this out, right? During the last recession, there was research around when you know, who dropped out at the highest percentage rate and who stayed in sports. And of course it was upper class and upper middle class kids, mostly white, right? And it was, you know, racial minorities and people economically disadvantaged. And during COVID, it's again, right? It's the same thing. Yep. So youth sport the gateway has become something for the wealthy. And that's a huge problem.
Yeah, I think felt like with the recession, some teams disappeared, at least in some of our markets. It feels like some leagues have now disappeared, hit especially by the, factors that you just spoke of.
Yeah, for sure.
As you mentioned the Way of Champions, being out here in Colorado, I've come across coaches that have been part of the event. Always, again, one of the ways I've always followed you and your guys' work. But what do you guys got cooking? Can you tell people what Way of Champions is? I know you've been doing it for many years, and then kind of what's cooking this year.
Yeah, well, let me go back a couple of years. So Way of Champions is the business. I have a partner on the conference, and his name's Dr. Jerry Lynch, and he's been a sports psychologist for 50 years and written 14 books and whatever. And so we connected, 7 years ago or 8. I don't even know anymore. And we just hit it off. Both our dads were New York City firemen. We had a lot in common there. Products of New York Catholic school education, all that sort of stuff. Jerry's an unbelievable athlete, was a Masters national age group record holder in the marathon, all that. So we really hit it off. And he was living in Boulder at the time, and we went for a hike, and we talked about how we could do something together. And we were hashing out this idea of a conference. And he's like, look, I have all this material, but I don't, but I have a flip phone, and I'm like, look, I can do the online part and I can sign people up and whatever, and I have material, and you've got this record, Jerry, right? You've won at this point, 39 NCAA titles. You're working with people who are winning world championships, Olympics, whatever. You have this philosophy of and a process, outcome aware, but purpose and process driven, and East versus West, and it works, right? And I have a lot of research and ideas around this, but I'm 50 years behind you in implementing this with teams. So let's partner on this. And so we're on this hike in Boulder, and we hash out this thing over 2 hours. We get to the top and we're overlooking Boulder. And I'm like, hey, Jerry, what's the name of this hike? He's like, I don't know. So we're walking down and I see this sign, and the hike we're on is called Mount Sanitas, Sanitas, and so I'm like, oh, wonder what that means. So I get back, we get a signal again. I look up the word sanitas, and it's this Latin word that says like soundness of mind, soundness of body, correctness of style. And I'm like, holy cow, that's what we just spoke about for 2 hours, right? If we can coach this way, if we can lead this way, if we can build teams this way, good things happen. So that was the origin of let's do a conference. And it started in Boulder with 50 coaches. And, the last live one we did was, would have been 2019. And we had 170 coaches or something from 5 continents in Colorado. And then last year we did it virtually. Well, we had to cancel in 2020, right? We were planning on doing one. So we did it virtually last year. We had 260 coaches from every continent, including some guy who was stationed in Antarctica once in a while. So we did actually have all the continents covered. And it was amazing. And we did it virtually, and we sort of reimagined it of like, well, who's all the people we'd never get in the same room from a presenter, a guest standpoint. Like, we don't want to try to put on the same conference, because our conference, as your friends have probably told you, right? Like, it's about connection. It's about breakouts. It's not your typical coaching conference where
moving between hotel rooms and convention. Yeah.
And I went to this session. What do you do? No, we put everyone through the same thing, and we build connection and camaraderie and act like, hey, they're our team. And how do we go about this? And, I don't think there's too many coaching conferences where, like, in the afternoon on day 3, people are in tears talking about this changed my life, and so we knew we couldn't do that virtually. So how could we reimagine it? Well, let's bring in people that we couldn't. So we brought in Steve Kerr and Quinn Snyder and Tara Vanderveer from Stanford basketball, and Anson Dorrance and Jenny Levy from University of North Carolina, and George Mumford, mindfulness guy, and just kind of reimagine it. It was really cool. So here in 2022, when the world is still like, I don't know, we're going to do a virtual one in June. We haven't announced the guests yet, but we've got some new fantastic guests. And then that will cross into some sports that we didn't have present last year, which is awesome: football and baseball and stuff like that.
Cool.
And then we're going to probably try in August to do a live one, and we're going to put it on the calendar and see whether our pandemic becomes endemic and people are willing to go sit in a room for a while. So that's the plan for sure.
At least in Colorado, we can maybe sit outside for part of it, right?
We hope so. Yeah, we hope so.
You mentioned some amazing people, you guys had as guests in the past, and Dr. Jerry Lynch for sure. Who are some other people that, inspire you or you look to learn from to positively make change and change the game?
I mean, I've been incredibly lucky, and you probably know this, from having your own podcast. Like, I started it like, oh, let me get these people and help the coaches in our community learn, or whatever, parents or athletes, whatever. And now 250 something episodes in, I'm like, kind of selfish. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I love talking to these people, and most people are willing to give an hour of time. And so, I get to bring on guests who are like incredible coaches, like we've talked about, right? At the highest level, world champions, World Cup champions, all that. Get to bring on some pretty awesome athletes who, national teams, Olympics, World Cups, whatever it is. But I love the psychology piece. I love the sport science piece when we talk about skill acquisition and talent development. I love the, how do you become a better teacher? So pedagogy and things like that. Like I learned so much from that.
Pedagogy?
That's just like the practice of teaching.
Okay.
Right. So like, how do I, most of us coaches, right? What's our qualifications to coach? Well, I played football. I played soccer, but playing it and teaching it are two different things. So don't we really need to learn, like, how to be a better teacher. And so, and what's teaching? How do I communicate? How do I give feedback that's effective? How do I check for understanding? How do I know the difference between performance and learning? How do I design an environment that's the optimal learning environment? Like, these are things that we often never learn as coaches. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never met a coach who's like, I have too much practice time, let me give some back. Right. So if that's the case, then I need to be as efficient and effective as possible with the time that I have. Well, you know what? There's a heck of a lot of research out there that tells me how to do that. And so I love people like that as well. So I could list a ton of people that no one's ever heard of, or some people have heard of. But I just think, you go through and you find topics that you like, and I love when Steve Kerr says, "Oh my God, I listened to so-and-so in your podcast and I went to practice the next day and we did this and it was great." And, I'm like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, no doubt. One of the things that I always think is important, you talk about in your work is play. And when I work with football players, it's not do football, it's not work football, it's play football.
Mm-hmm.
Why is play so important as far as development and keeping kids engaged with sport?
I mean, I think, again, let's go into the research. And, there's a guy, Peter Gray, who's sort of famous for this work on the importance of play. And I mean, look at any animal out there. What do the young animals do? They play, and that's how they learn how to hunt and how to interact, and they learn hierarchy and all that. Play for children, what does it bring? It brings when it's free play, when it's really child-directed play, they own it, right? They invent the game. They make up the rules, and this is the field, and those are the goals, or whatever. They enjoy it, because if they don't enjoy it, then they stop and they go home or they do something else, right? And then they're intrinsically motivated to do more of it. And so the art of coaching is finding that balance between, like, why did kids sign up? Right? Like, no one signed up to, like, oh God, I hope we stand in line all day, every day. Right?
Right.
They don't sign up. Like, they signed up to play a game. And so our job as coaches is, how do we let them play as much as possible? Every sport's different, right? You can't just line up, 11v11 football day after day and let them beat the crap out of each other. Right? So you have to find, and you have to find your moments to teach. But how can I teach within a game that makes this feel like play, so that at the end of it, they're like, that was great. When do we get to do that again? Yep. And that's the art. And then how do we back out as a coach so that kids can make decisions, so that kids can own it, so that they're free to make mistakes and fail, and not avoiding those things. This is it. Right. I just had a conversation with a parent this morning, a friend whose kid was afraid to shoot. And I was just saying, like, yeah, give me a basketball player who's afraid to shoot, and I'll show you a basketball player who's been yelled at for missing shots or told not to shoot in the past. Right.
Fair.
Yeah. So yeah, play is awesome.
Yeah. Let them play. If you could wave a magic wand and change something instantaneously about everything in youth coaching, what would you want to wave the wand and make happen?
I mean, I think I would say, right, like I could think of some concrete things that would, do it. But I think if I could wave a magic wand and all of a sudden every coach, regardless of someone who does it for a profession like yourself, to the dad who just volunteered to do, a season of Pop Warner football or whatever, is be really, really aware of your influence, right? Be aware of your influence and ask yourself, right, if I was a player in this practice, would I want to be a player in this practice? Right? And aware of how every word you say, how every body movement, right, sends a message that's either positive or negative. And if you're not careful about that message, you know, that, you know, sport isn't good, right? Sport's neutral. Like, it's only good and a force for good when you make it such. So that's what I would think. Cause I don't think many coaches recognize their influence, and if they do and still use it poorly and then dismiss that as, kids these days are soft or whatever. So that'd be my magic spell. I don't know what you would call that one, but
we'll figure it out.
awareness, the self-awareness spell.
Yeah, no, I love it. No, that'd be amazing. You're an athlete yourself, back in your time, just like a lot of us, probably most of our listeners on this podcast. You could jump into a time machine and go back and visit 16-year-old John. What's one thing from your journey that you've learned that you'd want to tell your younger self?
It's a great question. There would definitely be, don't go to the game when you're 17 that you like broke your tib fib. would have skipped that game. Then again, maybe I wouldn't, because that's all part of who I am today. You know, I think when you ask people that, like, and if you're okay with who you are and what you do in the moment, then it's really hard to say I would change anything.
Yeah,
I think the biggest thing that a 16-year-old athlete never feels is what a privilege it is to play, and how quickly this goes by.
Yeah.
And pretty soon you won't have, you know, so when you're complaining about doing the running, well, you know, what you really are going to regret is when you have nothing to run for anymore, you know? And so, you know, just take advantage of these moments. And, if you really love this and want to do this, live in a way that gets you towards that goal every day. And that's a 50-year-old talking to a 16-year-old. I don't think 16-year-olds can really grasp that concept, because it's like, whatever, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being hurt in college and be like, whatever, who cares? So that'll hurt when I'm 50. And now I'm 50. I'm like, darn it, my knee, you know?
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. One other question.
I don't know. What would you say? Like, what would you say to yourself?
You know, I think to me, and I know I've asked this question to numerous guests, I think, so I've heard a lot of input, but I used to always joke, I probably just kind of needed to be kind of punched.
Yeah.
I needed some humility at 16.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely thought I was too cool for my britches, and, you know, and life serves it up eventually, and it did my senior year in a different way, but I was closer to 18 by then. But it served it up hard at 18. And you know, I think, just like you mentioned, is also how quickly sports can go away, whether it's by injury, poor decisions, combinations of pandemic, who knows? I mean, teams and things can go away quickly. So I think that really that big humility pill is probably what I would have given myself some advice on.
Well, there you go. Yeah. I mean, again, I think we can all think of things that we would appreciate a little more of, but I think overall I appreciated my experience growing up, for sure.
Yeah, me too. And I think, you know, the old no struggle, no strength, right? I mean, those are kind of things that create who we are. And, you know, those situations are meant to be, we can say, or whatever you believe in, which is kind of the last question that I wanted to wrap up with. I think youth sports, high school sports, aspiring athletes shooting for what, you know, high aspirations, especially when they're internal, not an external factor pushing those aspirations, of chasing a dream, chasing a belief. We see too often in youth sports, sometimes the wrong parent, wrong coach, just like you talked about, downgrade those opportunities or kind of maybe poo-poo those dreams to people. Can you just talk about, because I'm a big proponent, it's one of the things I love to talk about, is just how vital the power of belief can be, not just our internal belief, but when we can transfer that belief through coaching or being a teammate.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we talk about, we talk about a lot. Jerry has this acronym that we call the river, right? And that when you make someone feel respected, when they're inspired, when they're validated, when they're empowered, and when they feel relevant, right, and they have a role, like when you do that for people, that's when they perform their best. And I think you could maybe throw all those things under the heading of belief, right? Like
Yeah.
when someone has those things, then they believe in themselves. Then they believe in the fact that they could, they can make this shot, or they can make this team, or whatever. And so, I mean, we learn more and more. This guy Fergus Connolly once said to me, he said, psychology is just physiology that we haven't been able to prove yet. And I kind of like that idea in a way, because we're now open much more to the effect of the mind upon the body.
No doubt.
And we all know this, right? I mean, if you go through a time of great stress, right, and then you get on the scale a week later, you might have lost 10 pounds, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea that what's going on the inside has no effect on the outside is such crap. And yet there's this, bias in sport that if you're thinking about belief, if you're thinking about the inner game, you're somehow weak or whatever. But yet, no, like, why wouldn't you train that? That'd be like, I'm not going to go to the weight room. That's not important. Like, we'd never say that.
Yeah.
Well, then train that inner game too, because the most influential coach in your life is the voice in your head.
Hands
and
down.
It can really screw you up, or it can push you forward. And it can do both in the same day. It can do both in the same play.
True.
So yeah.
Well, John, greatly appreciate you coming on. Appreciate the insight. Great stuff, and love everything you're about and everything you share, my man.
Well, it's awesome. And I hope some of your listeners, check out Change the Game Project, and check out the Way of Champions. And, I love the work that you're doing as well. The world needs many voices out there, because as my kids show me every day, they're certainly not all going to listen to me.
Oh, yeah. And I spent the last a year and a half on a college football staff out here. And it was, a lot of kids. I mean, even the kids, the kids that are playing at that level still, just the things that need to be developed and the inner game. And, it was a school, they got 400 plus athletes, one sports psychologist that has 20 hours a week, and
good luck with that. Yeah.
And they're doing the 20 hours are all people with, they're not prehabbing kind of situations. And so, to be able to work with football team and stuff was great, but it's just like kids are hungry for it, even when they have kind of their talent has got them there.
They're
trying
for sure
to figure out a lot of things in this weird world. So
it is. And it's really weird right now. and I mean, let's leave that as a parting thought for anyone listening. Like, there's no playbook right now, and kids are suffering right now. And the things that I've heard in the last, 2 years almost now of what kids are going through, the things that have gotten them to the point of being hospitalized or, seeking counseling or whatever, like, and family disruptions and separations and divorces and all that. Like, my God, like more in the last 2 years than in the previous 25. Right. And so, like, just have some grace for your kids.
Yeah, we'll end with that. If you're out there listening, have a little extra grace with yourself and a little grace with those around you, and have a great day. John, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
That was awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in and all the way to the end. Appreciate that. If something this episode caught your ear, is useful or unique, I would love if you would share it, or, a thumbs up's always encouraging as well. If you want to come back and check out more videos, smash that subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications, and we'd love to have you back. Have a great day, and go elevate others.